You pull out your phone, tap a button, and within seconds you know the name of a song you've never heard before. It feels like magic, but here's what you never think about. How does a phone actually recognize a song? Not by lyrics, not by humming, by listening to a few messy seconds of audio playing through tinny speakers in a crowded room. That should be impossible, and for years it was. Before Shazam existed, if you heard a song on the radio and didn't catch the name, you had exactly one option. You waited. You hoped the DJ would say it. You tried to remember a few words and typed them into a search engine hours later, usually getting it wrong. In the late 1990s, a handful of engineers started wondering if there was another way. What if a machine could just listen and know? The problem was signal versus noise. When you hold a phone toward a speaker in a bar, the audio reaching that microphone is nothing like the clean studio recording. It's distorted by room echo, background chatter, clinking glasses, and the limited quality of a tiny phone mic. Even the best audio recognition systems at the time worked only with clean, uncompressed digital files. No one had solved the real-world version of this problem. The real world is messy. Music recognition in the real world was considered nearly unsolvable. In 1999, 4 people decided to try anyway. Chris Barton, Philip Engelbrecht, Duraj Mukherjee, and a Stanford-trained signal processing researcher named Avery Wang. They founded a company originally called Shazam Entertainment in London. Their pitch sounded almost laughable. Dial a number, hold your phone toward the music, wait, get a text message back with the song title and artist. That was it. Investors thought it was a party trick. Most audio engineers thought it was a fantasy. The reason was math. Matching a short, noisy audio clip against a database of millions of songs requires comparing an enormous number of possible features. Standard audio recognition at the time relied on features like pitch tracking or mel-frequency cepstral coefficients, a technical way of describing the timbre or texture of a sound. But those methods were fragile. Change the volume, add background noise, or play the song through a bad speaker, and the matching fell apart completely. Avery Wang knew that if he wanted Shazam to work in the real world, he needed a fundamentally different approach. What Wang invented was a technique he called an acoustic fingerprint. Instead of trying to capture everything about the sound, he focused on what he called landmark points. He would take the audio sample and convert it into a spectrogram, which is essentially a visual map of which frequencies are loudest at each moment in time. Think of it like a landscape. Low frequencies at the bottom, high frequencies at the top, and time stretching left to right. On this landscape, certain peaks stand out. Specific combinations of frequencies that occur at specific moments. Wang realized that these peaks, these landmarks, were remarkably resistant to noise. Even in a noisy bar, the core landmark pattern of a song would survive. But landmarks alone weren't enough. A single landmark could appear in thousands of songs. Wang's breakthrough was pairing landmarks together using a technique called combinatorial hashing. He would take one landmark and combine it with a nearby landmark, creating a pair. Then he would calculate a hash value based on the frequencies of both landmarks and the time difference between them. Each hash became a tiny fingerprint. A single song could produce thousands of these paired hashes. The genius was that even if a few hashes got destroyed by noise, the remaining ones would still match. It was like identifying a person not by one fingerprint, but by recognizing that they had freckles on their left cheek, a scar above their right eye, and a gap between their 2 front teeth all at once. Lose one feature and the others still work. Wang published his key paper in 2003. It was called an industrial-strength audio search algorithm. In it, he described how the system could identify a song from just a 2-second sample of noisy audio with remarkable accuracy. 2 seconds. That was enough. The paper became one of the most cited works in the field of music information retrieval. Researchers around the world were stunned. Avery Wang had essentially solved a problem that most of the audio engineering community had written off as impractical. But the algorithm was only half the battle. To match your audio sample against songs, you needed a database of fingerprints for every song you wanted to recognize. In the early days, Shazam's team had to manually catalog tracks. They painstakingly processed songs one by one, building up their fingerprint library. The original UK launch in 2002 supported only about 2 million songs. Compare that to today, where Apple Music alone hosts over 100 million tracks. Every new song that enters the database has to be fingerprinted. Every remix, every re-release, every obscure B-side. The database was and still is an enormous undertaking. The original Shazam service didn't even use an app. It was a phone number, 2580 in the UK. You dialed it, held your phone up for about 30 seconds, hung up, and waited for a text message. Each call cost 50 pence. It felt ancient even then, but people used it. They used it in pubs, at house parties, sitting in their cars at red lights. The fact that it worked at all felt like breaking a rule of physics. You pointed a cheap phone at a distorted speaker, and a machine told you the name of the song. The infrastructure behind those early calls was surprisingly simple but fragile. Shazam ran its matching servers on a relatively modest setup. The matching process itself was fast because Wang's hashing system allowed for near-instant lookup. You weren't scanning the entire database. You were looking up hash values in a table. That's the elegance of the design. The combinatorial hashing turned an impossibly large comparison problem into a simple database lookup. Instead of comparing your sample to every song in the library, you just asked the database, "Who else has this hash?" The answer came back in milliseconds. By 2008, Shazam had launched as a smartphone app. This changed everything. The interface became visual. You could see album art, read lyrics, buy the song instantly. Users didn't need to dial a number anymore. They just tapped. And the database grew rapidly. Shazam expanded from 2 million songs to tens of millions. Music labels began cooperating because Shazam was driving purchases. When a song appeared on television or in a movie, Shazam usage would spike, and that data became valuable. Record companies started paying attention to Shazam charts the way they paid attention to radio play. But the early years were not easy. In 2004, Shazam nearly ran out of money. The company had raised about $8 million in funding, but the costs of running servers, cataloging music, and maintaining the phone-based service were enormous. Revenue from those 50 pence calls barely covered it. The team had to make painful cuts. Some employees left. The founders took reduced salaries. It was a close call. If the smartphone revolution had arrived just a few years later, Shazam might not have survived to see it. The core algorithm that Avery Wang designed in those early years has been refined but never replaced. Modern Shazam still uses the same fundamental approach: landmark points, combinatorial hashing, fast database lookup. The improvements have been in the size of the database, the speed of matching, and the ability to handle even more degraded audio. But the skeleton of the system is what Wang built over 20 years ago. That is remarkable. In an industry where algorithms are rewritten every few years, the acoustic fingerprint at the heart of Shazam has endured. In 2018, Apple acquired Shazam for approximately $400 million. At that point, Shazam had been downloaded over 1 billion times and had identified more than 30 billion songs. Apple integrated it directly into the iPhone's operating system. Today, your iPhone can recognize a song from the control center without even opening an app. It happens so seamlessly that you probably forget there's an algorithm behind it. An algorithm that was once considered nearly impossible. Here's what makes this story worth knowing. Every time you tap that button and a song name appears on your screen, you're witnessing the result of one researcher's refusal to accept that a problem was unsolvable. Avery Wang didn't invent new hardware. He didn't need a supercomputer. He looked at a spectrogram and noticed something about the peaks that everyone else had overlooked. He understood that the right features would survive noise, that the right pairing of data points would create a unique signature, that a problem everyone called impossible was actually just poorly framed. And that might be the real lesson here. The next time you think a problem is too hard, too messy, too noisy to solve, remember that a few seconds of distorted music from a bar speaker used to be completely unrecognizable to any machine on Earth. Now your phone does it before you finish tapping. The impossible is often just the unsolved, and the unsolved is just waiting for someone stubborn enough to look at the problem differently.